The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the Mercantile, and Diana Kensington stepped down into the dust of Las Lunas, New Mexico territory, with nothing but the worn traveling dress on her back and exactly $3 hidden in her shoe. The August sun of 1878 beat down mercilessly as she surveyed the town that would either be her salvation or her grave, depending on whether her Aunt Margaret still lived at the address she'd written 5 years ago. "That will be all, miss," the driver said, not unkindly, tipping his hat before climbing back up to his perch. Diana watched the stage roll away, taking with it her last connection to everything she'd known. Behind her lay Philadelphia, her father's gambling debts, and the cruel merchant who'd bought those debts along with what he believed was the right to her hand in marriage. She'd fled in the night with only what she wore, selling her mother's pearl earring somewhere in Kansas for the stage fare west. The street bustled with afternoon activity. Cowboys drove cattle through the wide dirt road while women in bonnets hurried between shops, their arms full of parcels. The sound of a piano drifted from a saloon, mixing with the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. Diana clutched her small drawstring purse closer, trying to look like she belonged here, like she hadn't just arrived with absolutely nothing to her name. "Excuse me," she approached an older woman sweeping the boardwalk in front of a dress shop. "I'm looking for Margaret Thornton. She lives somewhere near the church." The woman's face fell. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry. Mrs. Thornton passed on last winter. Pneumonia took her quick." Diana felt the earth tilt beneath her feet. Her one plan, her only hope, evaporated like water on these dusty streets. She steadied herself against a post, trying to breathe through the panic rising in her chest. "You all right, dear? You look pale. Come sit down." The woman guided her to a bench. "I'm Mrs. Chen. My husband and I run the restaurant next door. When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning," Diana admitted, her voice barely a whisper. She had nothing now. No family, no money for lodging, no prospects. The $3 in her shoe might buy her a few meals, but then what? "Come with me." Mrs. Chen pulled her to her feet with surprising strength. "Nobody goes hungry in my establishment." Diana found herself seated at a small table in the back of Chen's restaurant, a bowl of beef stew placed before her that made her stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. She tried to eat slowly, to maintain some dignity, but it had been so long since she'd had a proper meal. "Thank you," she said when she could speak again. "I'll find a way to repay you." "You looking for work?" Mrs. Chen asked, studying her with sharp but kind eyes. "I can do anything. I'm educated. I can read, write, do figures. I can clean, cook, sew, anything honest." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "The schoolhouse needs a teacher. Last one married the banker and moved to Santa Fe. But that won't start until September and you need something now. Can you really cook?" "My mother taught me before she died. I ran my father's household for 3 years." "Why did you come all this way to your aunt's if you had a home?" Diana's hands tightened around the spoon. "My father passed. There were debts. I had to leave." Mrs. Chen understood immediately. She'd seen enough of the world to read between those careful words. "The Crossing S Ranch needs a cook. Old Cookie Pete broke his leg last week. Won't be fit for work for months. Owner's been in town every day trying to find someone. Most women don't want to go out to a ranch with a bunch of cowboys even if the pay is good." "I'll do it," Diana said immediately. "When can I meet him?" "He usually comes by the saloon around sunset. I'll send word you're interested." Mrs. Chen paused. "The Crossing S is a good outfit. Owner is Samuel Ortega. His father was Mexican, mother was from Texas. He's honest, runs a clean operation. You won't have trouble there if you can handle the work." Diana spent the afternoon helping Mrs. Chen in the restaurant, trying to make herself useful and keep her mind off her precarious situation. As the sun began to sink toward the distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Mrs. Chen sent her husband to fetch Samuel Ortega. Deanna was washing dishes when she heard boots on the wooden floor behind her. She turned, wiping her hands on a borrowed apron, and found herself looking up into the darkest eyes she'd ever seen. Samuel Ortega stood well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and lean in the way of men who worked hard from dawn to dusk. His black hat was pushed back to reveal sun-bronzed skin and thick dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He couldn't have been more than 25 or 26, younger than she'd expected. There was something in his face that suggested both strength and unexpected gentleness, a combination that made her breath catch. "Miss Kensington." His voice was deep, with the faintest trace of an accent that softened his words. "Mrs. Chen said you're looking for work as a cook." "Yes, sir. I can cook for large groups. I'm organized and I'm not afraid of hard work." His eyes traveled over her worn dress, taking in details she wished she could hide. But there was no judgment in his gaze, only assessment. "The job pays $30 a month plus room and board. You'd have your own cabin near the main house. You'd be cooking 3 meals a day for me and 10 to 15 ranch hands, depending on the season. The work is hard and the hours are long. The men are decent, but they're cowboys. They're rough around the edges, though they'll treat you with respect or answer to me." "I'll take it," Deanna said without hesitation. "Don't you want to know more about the situation? Ask some questions. Mr. Ortega, I arrived in Las Lunas 3 hours ago with nothing but the clothes on my back. My aunt, who I came to stay with, is dead. I have $3 to my name and no prospects. Unless you're planning to work me to death or let your men mistreat me, any job is better than what I'm facing otherwise." Something flickered in his eyes. "Respect, maybe, or recognition. Fair enough. I admire honesty. We leave at first light tomorrow. Be at the livery stable at sunrise. I'll be there." He turned to go, then paused. "Miss Kensington, Mrs. Chen mentioned you just arrived today. Where are you staying tonight?" Diana's chin lifted even as heat flooded her cheeks. "I'll find something." "With $3. He shook his head. "The boarding house costs 50 cents a night. That would leave you nothing for the stage if this didn't work out." He pulled some coins from his pocket and placed them on the table. "Consider it an advance on your wages. Get a room, buy yourself whatever you need. I'll see you tomorrow." Before she could protest, he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him. Deanna stared at the coins on the table. 2 silver dollars. He'd given her enough for the room and a bit more besides, trusting that she'd show up tomorrow, trusting that she wouldn't just take the money and disappear. Mrs. Chen smiled at her. "I told you. Honest man." That night, lying in a narrow bed at the boarding house, Deanna stared at the ceiling and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. A ranch full of cowboys, miles from town, cooking for men she'd never met. But Samuel Ortega's eyes had been kind, even if his manner was gruff, and she'd learned to read men's characters quickly after watching her father's gambling friends for years. There had been no meanness in the rancher, no predatory gleam that would have warned her away. She touched the worn fabric of her dress, her only possession in the world. Tomorrow she would begin a new life, as different from Philadelphia society as anything she could have imagined. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, for the first time since fleeing her father's house, she felt something like hope. Dawn came early in New Mexico territory. Diana was at the livery stable as the sky turned from black to gray to pale blue, the morning star still visible on the western horizon. Samuel Ortega was already there, checking the harness on a sturdy wagon. "Morning," he said, looking surprised to see her so prompt. "Did you eat?" "Not yet. Here." He handed her a cloth bundle. Inside she found fresh bread and cheese. "Eat while we drive, it's 2 hours to the ranch." Deanna climbed up to the wagon seat, trying not to notice how her dress had accumulated more dust and wear. She ate the bread slowly, savoring each bite, as Samuel guided the horses out of town and onto a well-worn track that headed northeast into rolling hills, covered with golden grass and scattered juniper trees. For a while, they rode in silence. Deanna watched the landscape unfold, so different from anything she'd known. The air smelled of sage and dust and something wild she couldn't name. In the distance, mountains rose purple and imposing against the endless sky. "Where are you from?" Samuel asked eventually. "Philadelphia. And you?" "Born right here in New Mexico. My father came up from Mexico as a young man, worked as a vaquero on a big ranch, saved his money, bought his own land. I inherited it when he died. I'm sorry about your father. It was 5 years ago. He lived to see me make something of the place, at least." Samuel's hands were steady on the reins, his profile strong against the morning light. "What about you? What brings a Philadelphia lady all the way out here?" Diana considered lying, then remembered what he'd said about admiring honesty. "My father died with substantial debts. The man who bought those debts wanted to marry me as part of the settlement. I declined and left before he could force the issue." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Smart. Men like that don't make good husbands. That was my assessment as well." He glanced at her, and for the first time she saw the hint of a smile on his lips. "You talk like a book. I read a great many of them. We have books at the ranch. My mother insisted on education. I went to school in Santa Fe for a few years." He seemed almost defensive about it, as if expecting her to doubt him. "That must have been interesting. It was different. The city boys didn't know what to make of me. Too Mexican for some, too American for others, too cowboy for everybody." The old hurt was buried deep, but Deanna heard it anyway. "People are often uncomfortable with those who don't fit neatly into their expectations," she said quietly. "I understand something about that." He looked at her again, longer this time, and Diana felt heat rise in her face that had nothing to do with the climbing sun. There was intelligence in those dark eyes, and a loneliness she recognized because it matched her own. "The men will test you," Samuel said, returning his attention to the road. "Not meanly, but they'll want to see what you're made of. Best cook we ever had was Cookie Pete, and he earned their respect by being tough as leather and twice as stubborn. You stand your ground, do good work, and they'll come around. I'm not afraid of hard work or rough men. Good, because we've got plenty of both." The crossing S came into view as they crested a hill. The ranch sprawled across a broad valley, with a main house of adobe and wood, several barns, corrals full of horses, and scattered outbuildings. Cattle dotted the grassland beyond, hundreds of them from what Deanna could see. It was bigger than she'd expected, more prosperous looking. "Your cabin is there." Samuel pointed to a small structure set apart from the bunkhouse, but not far from the main house. "It's simple, but it's got a good stove, a bed, a table. I'll have some of the boys bring water barrels over. The main kitchen is in that building attached to the dining hall. You'll cook there, serve there. The men eat at 6 in the morning, noon, and 6 at night. Cookie Pete usually had something ready for snacking in between, coffee always on." Deanna nodded, trying to memorize everything. "Today, just settle in and look over the kitchen. I had the boys clean it up after Pete left, but you'll want to organize it your own way. Tomorrow you start cooking. I'll introduce you to the men at supper tonight. I had Maria from town come out and cook for the past few days, but she's got her own family to tend to." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Deanna was aware of how close they stood for a moment, how she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Then he stepped away, grabbing her small bundle of belongings. "Not much to carry," he observed. "I told you." "Just the clothes on my back." Something shifted in his expression. "Then I guess I've got everything else you'll need. Come on, I'll show you around." The cabin was small but clean, with whitewashed walls and a narrow bed covered in a colorful woven blanket. There was a washstand, a chair, a trunk for storage, and hooks on the wall for hanging clothes. A window looked out toward the main house and the mountains beyond. "It's perfect," Deanna said, and meant it. After the uncertainty of the past weeks, having any space to call her own felt like luxury. "Kitchen's next." Samuel led her to a larger building that held an impressive iron stove, work tables, shelves of supplies, and a separate room that served as a pantry and storage. The dining hall beyond had long tables and benches, could easily seat 20 men. Deanna walked through the kitchen, taking inventory. Flour, cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, coffee, canned goods, spices. There were fresh vegetables in baskets, eggs in a crock, a side of beef hanging in the cool room. Cookie Pete had left things organized at least. "This is well stocked," she said, impressed. "I make sure of it. A cowboy who isn't fed properly isn't worth much." Cookie Pete understood that. He could make anything taste good, even trail food. Samuel leaned against the doorframe, watching her explore. "Think you can manage?" Deanna turned to face him. "Mr. Ortega, I'll be honest with you. I've never cooked for this many men at once, but I'm a fast learner. I won't waste your supplies, and I promise you no one will go hungry." "Fair enough. And Miss Kensington, it's just Samuel. We don't stand much on ceremony out here." "Then you should call me Deanna." He smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Deanna, pretty name, thank you. I'll leave you to get settled. If you need anything, the main house is right there. I've got paperwork this afternoon, so I'll be around. Supper is at 6. Just put out whatever you can manage tonight. Don't worry about impressing anybody yet." After he left, Deanna stood in the middle of the kitchen and took a deep breath. She'd cooked for her father and his occasional guests, had helped her mother prepare meals for small dinner parties. But this was different. This was her livelihood now, her place in this new world. She couldn't afford to fail. She spent the afternoon familiarizing herself with everything, planning a simple but hearty meal for the evening. She found bread dough already rising, probably started by Maria that morning. She could bake that, fry up some salt pork, make gravy, cook beans. Nothing fancy but filling. As she worked, she heard the sounds of the ranch around her. Men calling to each other, horses whinnying, the lowing of cattle in the distance. This was her world now, so far from everything she'd known. She thought of her mother who had died when Deanna was 16, and wished she could ask her advice. But her mother had always said Deanna was strong, resourceful. She would have to prove that now. At 6 o'clock, men began filing into the dining hall. Deanna had set out the food on the long tables, had coffee poured into tin cups. Samuel came in last, and the room quieted as he raised his hand. "Boys, this is Miss Deanna Kensington. She's our new cook while Pete heals up. I expect you to treat her with respect and keep your language clean in her presence. She works for me, which means she's under my protection. We understand each other." There was a chorus of "yes," "boss," and "sure thing," Samuel, from the assembled men. Deanna counted 14 of them, ranging in age from a boy who couldn't be more than 18 to a grizzled man with gray in his beard. They were dusty, sunburned, and watching her with curious but not unkind eyes. "Miss Kensington, anything you want to say?" Samuel asked. Deanna stepped forward, willing her voice to stay steady. "I'm learning this kitchen and I appreciate your patience while I do. If you have particular preferences or complaints, tell me directly and I'll do my best to accommodate. I promise to keep you fed and the coffee hot." One of the older cowboys grinned. "That's all we ask, miss. Welcome to the Crossing S." The meal passed without incident. The men ate hungrily, and if her cooking wasn't as good as Cookie Pete's, nobody complained. They cleared their plates, thanked her politely, and filed out to evening chores or the bunkhouse. Samuel was the last to leave. "That went well," he said. "They liked you. How can you tell? They didn't give you any grief. That means they're willing to give you a chance." He picked up his hat from where he'd hung it by the door. "You did good today, Deanna. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be harder." Deanna cleaned the kitchen until everything gleamed, then walked back to her cabin in the gathering dark. The sky was enormous above her, filled with more stars than she'd ever seen in Philadelphia. The air had cooled quickly, and she wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the ache of exhaustion in her bones. Inside her cabin, she lit the lamp and sat on the bed. She was here. She'd done it. She had a job, a place to sleep, and food to eat. It wasn't the life she'd been raised for, but it was honest work, and she was safe. That was more than she'd had yesterday. As she lay down to sleep, her last thought was of Samuel Ortega's dark eyes and unexpected smile. She told herself firmly that he was her employer, nothing more, and that she needed to focus on keeping her job. But she was only human, and he was the first person in a long time who'd looked at her like she was worth something. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that was both exhausting and strangely satisfying. Deanna rose before dawn to start breakfast, feeding hungry cowboys before they rode out to the day's work. She baked bread, learned to stretch ingredients into meals for 15, discovered which men liked their coffee strong enough to strip paint, and which ones had a secret weakness for sweet things. The cowboys gradually warmed to her. There was Tom, the oldest hand who'd worked for Samuel's father and had opinions about everything. Young Jimmy, barely 18, who blushed whenever she spoke to him. Carlos and Miguel, brothers from Mexico who taught her Spanish words while she practiced her pronunciation. Frank, the trail boss, who was all business except when he thought no one was watching him sneak extra biscuits. And there was Samuel, who seemed to be everywhere at once, managing the ranch with quiet competence. He checked on her daily, asking if she needed anything, if the men were behaving, if the work was manageable. He brought her fresh vegetables from the garden he kept behind the main house, venison, when hunting was good, little things that made her job easier. She noticed things about him. How he was always the first up in the morning and the last to bed. How he treated his horses with gentle patience, but could break up a fight between his men with a single sharp word. How he read in the evenings, sitting on his porch with a book in the lamplight. How he spoke fluent Spanish with Carlos and Miguel, switching between languages without seeming to think about it. "You're staring," Tom said one day, catching her watching Samuel work a young horse in the corral. She'd brought water out to the men working nearby. Diana felt her face heat. "I was just watching him train the horse." Tom's weathered face creased in a knowing smile. "That boy's got a gift with animals, got a gift for a lot of things. Shame he's so set on being alone." "What do you mean?" "He's 26 years old, owns a good ranch, and could have his pick of young ladies from here to Santa Fe. But he keeps to himself, doesn't court nobody. I think he's afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of not being enough. His father was Mexican, and some folks around here never let him forget it. He's too proud to go where he's not fully welcome, so he just stays out here and works himself half to death." Tom shook his head. "Shame, like I said." Deanna thought about that conversation as she prepared supper that evening. She understood something about pride and fear, about not fitting into the world you were born into. She understood loneliness too, the kind that settled into your bones even when you were surrounded by people. She was rolling out pie dough when Samuel came into the kitchen. He often stopped by in the late afternoon, ostensibly to check on things, but really, she suspected, just to talk. "Smells good," he said, leaning against the counter. "Is that apple pie?" "Dried apples, but yes. Tom mentioned it was your favorite." "Tom talks too much." But Samuel looked pleased. "How are you settling in?" "It's been almost a month now. I'm well. The men are kind and I'm getting the hang of the work." "You're doing more than getting the hang of it. The boys tell me you're the best cook they've had in years." "Don't tell Pete I said that when he comes back." Deanna laughed. "Your secret is safe with me." Samuel was quiet for a moment, watching her work. "You miss Philadelphia?" "Not even a little bit." She crimped the edge of the pie crust with practiced fingers. "Do you ever wish you were somewhere else?" "Used to. When I was younger, I thought about going to California, seeing what else was out there. But this land is in my blood. My father built something here and I want to keep building it." He paused. "Gets lonely sometimes, though." Deanna looked up and found him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. There was longing in his eyes and something else she didn't dare name. The kitchen suddenly felt very warm and very small. "Samuel, she started, but was interrupted by Jimmy bursting through the door. "Boss, we've got a problem. Some of the cattle broke through the fence on the North Range. Frank says we need to ride out right now before they scatter too far." Samuel's expression shifted instantly to business. "Right, get everybody saddled up." He turned back to Deanna. "I'm sorry. I have to go," she said. "I understand." He grabbed his hat and was gone, leaving Deanna standing there with flour on her hands and her heart beating too fast. She told herself it was foolish, that she was imagining things, that men like Samuel Ortega didn't fall for women like her. But the look in his eyes had been real, she was certain of it. The men didn't return until well after dark. Deanna had kept supper warm and they ate quickly, too tired for much conversation. Samuel looked exhausted, dirt and sweat streaking his face. "Everyone get some rest," he told his men. "We'll finish the fence repairs tomorrow." The cowboys filed out, leaving Deanna alone with Samuel in the dining hall. "Let me fix you a plate," she said. "You barely ate anything." "I'm too tired to eat." "You'll sleep better with food in your stomach. Sit down." He was too weary to argue. Deanna brought him pie and coffee, then sat across from him, watching him eat in silence. "You're good at taking care of people," he said eventually. "It's what I was raised to do, just in a different context." "You ever regret coming here, taking this job?" Deanna considered the question seriously. "A month ago I had nothing. I was alone and scared and didn't know where my next meal would come from. Now I have work that matters, a place to sleep, and people who treat me with kindness. Why would I regret that? Some women would." "This isn't an easy life." "Easy lives are overrated." She smiled at him. "Besides, where else would I learn to cook for 15 hungry cowboys, bake bread at dawn, and make pie crust without measuring anything?" Samuel laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "When you put it that way, it sounds almost appealing." "It is appealing. For the first time in my life I feel useful, like what I do actually matters to someone." "It matters, Deanna, more than you know." His hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. "You've made this place better. Brighter, somehow." Deanna's breath caught. The lamplight cast shadows across his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the fullness of his lips. She wanted to touch him, to close that small distance between their hands and see what happened. But the moment passed. Samuel pulled back, standing abruptly. "I should get some sleep. Thank you for the supper." "Samuel, wait." He paused in the doorway but didn't turn around. "Yes." Deanna wanted to say so many things. Instead, she said, "Sleep well. You too." After he left, Deanna sat alone in the empty dining hall for a long time, trying to understand what was happening between them. She'd never felt like this before, this constant awareness of another person, this desire to be near him, to hear his voice, to make him smile. It was dangerous, she told herself. He was her employer. If she misread things, she could lose everything she'd built here. But when she finally went to bed, she dreamed of dark eyes and strong hands, of a voice that made her feel safe and desired all at once. The summer heat intensified as July turned to August. The work was relentless, the days long and dusty. Deanna learned to make lighter meals, to keep water barrels filled, to have cold cloths ready when the men came in from the range looking half dead from the sun. Samuel was everywhere, managing the ranch, helping with the hardest work, settling disputes, planning for the fall cattle drive. Deanna watched him push himself too hard, saw the exhaustion in his face and worried. One afternoon, she carried a jug of cool water out to where he was working on a broken wagon wheel. The heat was brutal, the sun directly overhead. "You need to drink something," she said, not asking. Samuel looked up from the wheel, sweat dripping down his face. "I'm fine." "You're going to collapse from heat exhaustion. Drink." She thrust the cup at him. He took it with a slight smile. "You're bossy when you want to be. Someone has to look after you since you won't do it yourself. Is that your job now, looking after me? Someone should." Deanna sat down on the wagon tongue, uninvited. "Tom says you work yourself too hard. Tom should mind his own business. He cares about you. Everyone here does." Deanna watched him drink the water, then refilled his cup. "Why do you push yourself like this?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the shimmering horizon. "My father came here with nothing. He faced prejudice from both sides, people who didn't think a Mexican had any right to own land, people who thought he'd forgotten where he came from. He proved them all wrong through pure hard work. Built this place from dust and determination. I can't let him down." "I don't think you could if you tried. Look at this place, Samuel. It's thriving. You've honored your father's legacy 100 times over. Maybe, but it's never enough, is it? There's always something more to do, someone to prove wrong, some standard to meet." He looked at her then, really looked at her. "You understand that, don't you? That feeling that you have to keep proving you deserve to exist." Diana's throat tightened. "Yes, I understand that very well." "What were you like in Philadelphia? Before everything happened?" "Useless," Deanna said bluntly. "I was raised to be decorative, to make pleasant conversation, to manage a household and look pretty at social events. I was taught to paint watercolors and play piano, to dance and curtsy and say nothing of substance. I was a doll in fancy dresses. I don't believe that. You're one of the strongest people I've met. I wasn't then. I was weak and afraid. My father drank and gambled away our money, and I just watched it happen. When he died and his debts came due, I ran away instead of facing it." She twisted her hands in her lap. "I'm a coward." Samuel set down the water cup and moved to sit beside her on the wagon tongue. The heat was oppressive, but his nearness made everything else fade away. "You're not a coward. You survived. You came out here alone, knowing nobody, with nothing. You took a job that most women wouldn't even consider, and you've done it well. That's not cowardice, Deanna. That's courage." She looked up at him, surprised by the intensity in his voice. "You really believe that?" "I know it. I've watched you these past weeks. You face every challenge without complaint. You treat my men with kindness but don't let them push you around. You work harder than anyone I've ever met, and you never act like it's beneath you, even though you were raised for something completely different." His hand came up, almost touching her face before he caught himself and lowered it. "You're remarkable." Diana's heart hammered in her chest. They were so close, alone in the brutal afternoon heat, and the air between them felt charged with possibility. Samuel, she whispered. He stood abruptly, putting distance between them. I should get back to work. Why do you do that? Every time we get close, you pull away. Deanna, you work for me. It wouldn't be right. That's not the real reason. She stood too, facing him. What are you afraid of? His jaw clenched. I'm not afraid. You are. You're terrified. But of what? That I'll say no, or that I'll say yes. Deanna, you don't understand, then explain it to me. Samuel ran a hand through his hair, frustration and something else warring in his expression. You're educated, cultured, from a good family back east. You've had a hard time, but you're still those things. I'm a half-Mexican cowboy who barely finished school. What do I have to offer someone like you? Deanna stared at him in disbelief. Samuel Ortega, you are one of the smartest, kindest, most honorable men I've ever met. You own a successful ranch, you treat your workers with respect, you read books and speak 2 languages. You gave a desperate stranger a job when she had nothing, trusted her with your household. You make me feel safe and valued and seen in a way no one ever has. What do you have to offer me? Everything that matters. The words hung in the air between them. Samuel looked stunned, like he hadn't expected her honesty. Deanna's face burned, but she didn't look away. You really mean that, he said finally, his voice rough. Every word. He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite their calluses and strength. Diana's breath stopped as he leaned down, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if he couldn't quite believe she wanted this. But when Deanna's hands came up to grip his shirt, pulling him closer, something broke loose in both of them. The kiss deepened, became urgent and hungry, all the weeks of longing and restraint finally released. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for weeks. Why didn't you? Because I'm an idiot, he laughed, the sound shaky. Because I was afraid you'd leave if I made things complicated. I'm not going anywhere, Deanna said firmly. Unless you want me to. God, no, Deanna, he stopped, seeming to struggle with words. I'm not good at this. I don't know how to court a woman properly, especially not someone like you. Then we'll figure it out together. No rules, no expectations. Just us being honest with each other. He kissed her again, softer this time, sweet and full of promise. When he pulled back, he was smiling in a way she'd never seen before, open and happy and young. Come to supper with me tonight, he said. Not in the dining hall at my house. Let me cook for you for once. Deanna laughed. You cook. Badly, but with enthusiasm. Please? I'd like that very much. They stood there in the blazing afternoon sun, grinning at each other like fools until Tom's voice called from across the yard that the horses needed attention. Samuel kissed her one more time, quick and firm, before jogging off to his work. Deanna walked back to the kitchen feeling lighter than she had in years. Everything was uncertain, she knew that. They were from different worlds and loving him wouldn't be simple. But for the first time since her mother died, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. That evening, Deanna knocked on the door of Samuel's house with nerves fluttering in her stomach. She'd changed into her only other dress, had washed and pinned her hair. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. Samuel opened the door and his face lit up. You look beautiful. You're a terrible liar, but thank you. His house was simple but comfortable, with adobe walls and wooden floors, furniture that was sturdy rather than fancy. Books lined shelves on one wall, a surprising number of them. Through a doorway, she could see the kitchen where smoke was starting to appear. Oh no, Samuel muttered, running toward the smoke. Deanna followed and found him frantically pulling a smoking pan off the stove. Whatever he'd been cooking was now charcoal. I told you I was a bad cook, he said sheepishly. Deanna couldn't help it. She started laughing, and once she started, she couldn't stop. Samuel joined in, and soon they were both doubled over, tears streaming down their faces. "Come on," Deanna said when she could breathe again. "Let me show you how it's done." They cooked together in his small kitchen, Deanna guiding his hands, teaching him how to check if meat was done, how to make a proper sauce. They worked side by side, bumping into each other in the cramped space, stealing kisses between stirring and chopping. It was chaotic and imperfect and wonderful. Over dinner, they talked like they never had before. Samuel told her about growing up between two cultures, never quite fitting into either. She told him about her mother's death, her father's decline, the lonely years trying to hold together a household that was crumbling around her. "I always felt invisible," Deanna admitted. "Like I was just a decorative object in my father's house, something to be traded away eventually for business connections or debt settlement." "I see you," Samuel said quietly. "I have from the first moment. You were terrified but trying so hard to be brave, standing there in your worn dress with your chin up, pretending you had everything under control. I thought you were magnificent." Deanna felt tears prick her eyes. "I thought you were kind. Everyone else in this town looked at me like a problem to be solved or ignored. You looked at me like a person who deserved help." He reached across the table and took her hand. "Deanna, I need to be honest with you about something. Building a life out here, it's hard. The ranch does well most years, but there are bad seasons too. Sometimes the work is dangerous. This territory can be harsh. If we become something more, I can't promise you an easy life. I don't want an easy life. I want a real one. I want to matter to someone, to build something that has meaning. I want to wake up every day knowing that what I do makes a difference, even if it's just making sure hungry cowboys get fed." She squeezed his hand. "I want all of that with you if you'll have me." Samuel's eyes were bright in the lamplight. "I'd be honored. But Deanna, we should take this slow. Let people get used to the idea of us. Some folks might have opinions. Let them. I've spent my whole life worrying about other people's opinions. I'm done with that." He smiled and raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "You're fearless." "No, I'm just tired of being afraid." They spent the rest of the evening on his porch, watching the stars come out. Samuel pointed out constellations, told her stories his father had told him about the vaqueros who navigated by the stars. Deanna leaned against his shoulder, feeling safe and happy in a way she'd never experienced before. When he walked her back to her cabin, they kissed goodnight in the shadow of her doorway, long and sweet and full of promise. "Tomorrow," he whispered against her lips. "Tomorrow and every day after," she promised. The next weeks were a kind of paradise despite the hard work. Deanna and Samuel stole moments together whenever they could, meeting after supper to walk along the creek that ran through his property, sitting together on his porch while he read aloud to her, finding excuses to be near each other during the day. The ranch hands noticed, of course. They weren't blind. But instead of disapproval, Deanna found quiet support. Tom winked at her when Samuel lingered too long in the kitchen. Carlos and Miguel taught her love songs in Spanish. Even stern Frank cracked a smile when he caught them holding hands behind the barn. "About time the boss found someone," Tom told her one morning while she was making breakfast. "He's been alone too long. You don't think it's inappropriate, me working here? I think Samuel Ortega is the loneliest man I've ever known, and you make him happy. That's all that matters to any of us." But not everyone was pleased. In late August, Deanna rode into Las Lunas with Samuel to pick up supplies. As they walked down the main street, she noticed people staring, whispering behind their hands. "Ignore them," Samuel said quietly, his hand at the small of her back. In the mercantile, the owner's wife, Mrs. Patterson, looked down her nose at Deanna. I heard you're working out at the Crossing S. Must be quite a change from Philadelphia. It's honest work, and I'm grateful for it. Living out there alone with all those men. People talk, you know. Samuel stepped forward, his voice cool. Miss Kensington is my employee and lives in her own cabin. She's treated with complete respect by everyone on my ranch. If people are talking, Mrs. Patterson, perhaps you should remind them not to spread gossip about things they know nothing about. Mrs. Patterson sniffed. I'm just saying it's not proper. What's not proper is making accusations about a lady's character when she's done nothing wrong. Samuel picked up the box of supplies he'd purchased. We'll be taking our business elsewhere from now on. Good day. Outside, Deanna touched his arm. You didn't have to do that. I can handle people like her. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. His jaw was tight with anger. This is exactly what I was worried about. People judging you because of me, because you work on my ranch. Samuel, I don't care what they think. You should. Your reputation, my reputation. In Philadelphia, I was the daughter of a drunk gambler who killed himself with his own vices. Here, I'm a woman who works hard and stands on her own 2 feet. I know which reputation I prefer. He pulled her into the narrow space between buildings out of sight of the street and kissed her fiercely. You're amazing, you know that. You mentioned it once or twice. Deanna, I don't want you to face gossip and judgment because of me. Maybe we should be more careful, keep things quiet until what? Until people decide we're acceptable. That could be never. Deanna cupped his face in her hands. I'm not hiding how I feel about you. If people have a problem with it, that's their problem, not ours. I love you, he said suddenly, the words bursting out like they'd been held back too long. I love you, and I don't know what I'd do if you left because people made your life difficult here. Deanna's heart swelled so full she thought it might burst. I love you too, and I'm not leaving. Not because of gossip, not because of anything. You're stuck with me, Samuel Ortega. He laughed and kissed her again, softer this time. Best news I've had all year. They spent the rest of the day in town, visiting the few shopkeepers who greeted them warmly, including Mrs. Chen, who hugged Diana and told Samuel he'd better treat her right or answer to the entire Chinese community. They bought fabric so Diana could make herself new dresses, a luxury that made her almost giddy. On the way back to the ranch, Samuel taught her to handle the wagon reins, laughing when she nearly steered them into a ditch. That night, sitting on his porch under the enormous star-filled sky, Deanna felt a peace she'd never known. This was home now, not because of the place but because of the man beside her. Whatever challenges came, they would face them together. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the start of preparations for the fall cattle drive. The ranch became a flurry of activity as the men sorted cattle, checked equipment, and planned the route to market. Samuel would be gone for nearly 3 weeks, and the prospect of that separation sat heavy on both their hearts. Come with us, Samuel said one evening as they walked along the creek. I know it's not traditional, but Cookie Pete always came on the drives. You could handle the cooking. A woman on a cattle drive, Samuel, that would cause even more gossip. I don't care about gossip. I care about being apart from you for 3 weeks. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Deanna, I know this is fast, that we've only known each other a few months, but when you know, you know. I want to spend my life with you. When I get back from this drive, I want to marry you, if you'll have me. Diana's breath caught. Samuel, are you proposing? Not yet. Not properly. I want to do it right with a ring and everything. But I need to know that you'd say yes before I go. I need something to hold on to while I'm gone. Yes, Deanna said without hesitation. Yes, when you ask properly, I'll say yes. I want to be your wife. I want to build a life with you here. I want everything with you. Samuel pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I'll be back as soon as I can. 3 weeks, maybe less if we push hard. I'll be waiting." The night before the drive, they had a farewell supper in the dining hall with all the men. Deanna had cooked their favorites, made extra pies, baked enough bread to last the first few days on the trail. The atmosphere was excited but subdued, everyone aware that cattle drives could be dangerous. After the meal, Samuel pulled her aside. "I'm leaving Tom here to watch over things, and I hired 2 of the Johnson boys to help with the heavy work while we're gone. You won't be alone, but I still worry." "Don't, I'll be fine. You just focus on getting those cattle to market and coming home safe." "I have every intention of coming home. I've got too much waiting for me here." He handed her a small leather pouch. "This is for emergencies. There's enough money to get you to Santa Fe if anything goes wrong, to set yourself up there until I can get back. Nothing is going to go wrong. Humor me, please." Deanna took the pouch and tucked it into her pocket. "Fine. But I won't need it because you're coming back in 3 weeks and then we're getting married." "Is that an order?" "Absolutely." He kissed her there in the shadow of the dining hall, long and deep and full of promise. "I love you, Deanna Kensington." "I love you too. Now go get some sleep. You have a long day tomorrow." The next morning, Deanna woke before dawn to make breakfast for the drive crew. The men ate quickly, loading up supplies and checking their horses one last time. In the pre-dawn darkness, Deanna stood in the yard and watched them prepare to leave, her heart heavy. Samuel came to her last. In front of all his men, not caring who saw, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly. 3 weeks, he promised. "Then I'm never leaving you again. I'm holding you to that." Then they were gone, riding out into the gray light of early morning, driving hundreds of cattle ahead of them. Deanna stood watching until they disappeared over the horizon, then went back to the kitchen to begin her day. 3 weeks. She could manage 3 weeks. The ranch felt empty with most of the men gone. Tom and the Johnson boys, Jake and Matthew, kept busy with maintenance work and tending the horses that had been left behind. Deanna cooked for the small crew, cleaned, organized, tried to keep herself busy. But the evenings were long and lonely, and she missed Samuel with an ache that surprised her with its intensity. She spent her free time sewing new dresses from the fabric they'd bought in town, reading books from Samuel's collection, writing letters to Mrs. Chen about her upcoming wedding. At night, she sat on the porch of her cabin and watched the stars, thinking about Samuel somewhere out there under the same sky. 2 weeks passed with agonizing slowness. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon while Deanna was baking bread, she heard horses approaching fast. She stepped out of the kitchen to see 2 riders coming hard toward the ranch. As they got closer, she recognized Carlos and Miguel, who should have been with the drive. Fear seized her heart. Something was wrong. The brothers pulled up in a cloud of dust. Miguel stayed on his horse, clearly ready to ride again immediately while Carlos dismounted. "Miss Deanna, there's been trouble," Carlos said quickly. 3 days ago we had a stampede. Nobody was killed, thank God, but the boss got thrown from his horse, broke his leg, maybe some ribs. He's stable, but he can't ride. Frank is bringing the herd the rest of the way to market, but someone needs to go get Samuel. He's at a doctor's house in Socorro. Deanna didn't hesitate. "How long will it take to get there?" "A full day's hard ride, maybe more for a wagon." "He'll need a wagon to come home in, he can't ride." "Tom," Deanna called. The old cowboy came running. "I need the wagon prepared with bedding and supplies. Carlos, you'll take me to Socorro. Tom, you're in charge here until we get back." "Miss Deanna, are you sure?" Tom looked worried. "That's a long trip for a lady." "Samuel needs me. I'm going." She turned to Carlos. "Give me 10 minutes to pack." Deanna threw clothes and supplies into a bag, grabbed the emergency money Samuel had given her, and was back at the wagon before Carlos had finished hitching the horses. Tom handed her a rifle. "Just in case," he said. "You know how to shoot?" "No, but I'll learn if I have to." Miguel rode ahead to tell Samuel they were coming. Carlos drove the wagon with Deanna beside him, and they set out at the fastest pace the horses could manage. The journey was long and dusty and exhausting. They stopped only to rest the horses and eat quick meals. Carlos told her about the stampede, how Samuel had been trying to turn the lead cattle and got caught in the rush. Frank and Tom had pulled him clear, but he'd been trampled before they could get him fully away. "He kept asking for you," Carlos said. "Even with broken ribs and leg, he was worried about you, worried how you'd manage without him." Diana's throat tightened. "How bad is he really?" "Bad enough." "The doctor in Socorro set his leg, but the ribs have to heal on their own. He was in a lot of pain when we left." They reached Socorro as the sun was setting the next day. Carlos directed her to a small house on the edge of town where the doctor lived and practiced. Deanna jumped down from the wagon before it fully stopped and ran to the door. A tired-looking man answered her knock. "Yes, I'm here for Samuel Ortega. I'm his fiancé." The doctor's face softened. "Come in. He's been asking for you constantly. This way." Samuel was in a small room at the back of the house, lying in a narrow bed with his right leg splinted and bandaged. His face was pale under his tan, bruises dark on his jaw and temple. When he saw Deanna in the doorway, his eyes filled with tears. "Deanna, you came." She crossed the room in 3 steps and took his hand carefully. "Of course I came. Did you think I wouldn't?" "I was afraid. Afraid you'd hear what happened and realize what you'd be signing up for, marrying a cowboy. It's a hard life, Deanna. Dangerous." "Hush. You're alive, and that's all that matters." She turned to the doctor. "Can I take him home?" "His leg should be stable enough for travel if you go slow. Keep it elevated, change the bandages every day, watch for fever. The ribs will hurt like hell for weeks, but there's nothing to be done for them except rest and time. Thank you for taking care of him." Diana paid the doctor from the emergency fund, then helped Carlos carefully move Samuel to the wagon. They'd made a bed of blankets and pillows in the back, and Samuel groaned as they settled him into it despite their gentleness. "I'm sorry," Carlos said. "I know it hurts, boss." "Not your fault," Samuel managed through gritted teeth. Deanna climbed into the back of the wagon with him. "Carlos, drive as smooth as you can. I'll stay back here with him." The journey home was slow and careful, every bump in the road making Samuel wince despite the padding. Deanna held his hand, wiped his forehead when fever spiked, gave him water and the laudanum the doctor had provided for pain. They talked when he felt up to it, were silent when he needed to rest. "I'm sorry," Samuel said at one point, his voice thick with pain and medication. "This isn't how I wanted to propose. I had it all planned. Was going to take you into town, buy you a proper ring, ask you right." "Samuel, I don't need a fancy proposal, I just need you. You deserve better than this, better than a broken-down cowboy in a wagon." Deanna leaned down and kissed his forehead gently. "I don't want better, I want you exactly as you are, broken leg and all." He managed a weak smile. "I love you so much." "I love you too. Now rest. Save your strength." It took 2 full days to get back to the Crossing S. Tom and the Johnson boys came running when they heard the wagon approach. Together, they carefully moved Samuel into his house and settled him in his own bed. Deanna immediately took charge, organizing his care, making sure he had everything he needed. "I should go back to my cabin," she said that first evening. "People will talk if I stay here nursing you." "Let them talk," Samuel said from his bed. "I need you here, please." "I'll stay," she promised. The next weeks were hard. Samuel was in considerable pain despite the medicine, frustrated by his inability to do anything, worried about the ranch and the work that was piling up. Deanna nursed him patiently, cooked for him, read to him when he couldn't sleep, managed the household and the remaining ranch hands. Frank returned with the rest of the crew after successfully selling the cattle at market. The drive had been profitable enough to see them through the winter and then some. He brought Samuel's payment directly to the house. "Good work," Samuel told him from his bed. "I'm sorry I wasn't there to see it through. You did the hard part, boss. We just finished what you started." Frank looked at Deanna, who was organizing medicine bottles on the bedside table. "Heard you rode all the way to Socorro to get him. That was brave." "It was necessary," Deanna said simply. As Samuel healed, they fell into a new routine. Deanna moved between his house and the kitchen, cooking for the crew during the day and caring for Samuel in the mornings and evenings. She read to him from his books, played cards with him when he was bored, helped him with the ranch accounts since he couldn't ride out to oversee things himself. "I'm useless like this," he complained one evening in late September. "You're injured. There's a difference. The ranch needs me. The ranch has Tom and Frank and a crew of good men, and it has me managing everything else. We're fine, Samuel. You just need to heal." He caught her hand as she tried to stand. "What did I do to deserve you? You offered a desperate woman a job when she had nothing. You treated her with kindness and respect. You made her feel valuable for the first time in her life." Deanna sat back down on the edge of the bed. "You loved her." "I do love you more every day." He tugged her hand gently. "Will you marry me? I know I asked before, but this is the real question. I don't have a ring yet and I'm stuck in this bed and it's not romantic at all, but I can't wait anymore. Deanna Kensington, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, absolutely yes." He pulled her down for a kiss that was gentle because of his ribs but no less passionate for it. "As soon as I can walk again, we're going into town and finding a preacher. I'll hold you to that." October arrived with crisp air and golden leaves on the cottonwoods along the creek. Samuel's ribs healed, and he graduated from bed to a chair, then to crutches. The doctor in Las Lunas checked his progress and declared him recovering well. By the end of the month, he was walking with a cane, insisting on doing more around the ranch despite Diana's protests. "I've been lying around for 6 weeks," he said. "I'm going crazy. Your leg isn't fully healed. It's healed enough." "Deanna, I love that you're taking care of me, but I need to feel useful again." She understood that, so she stopped arguing. But she watched him carefully, making sure he didn't push too hard too fast. In early November, Samuel declared himself well enough to ride into town. Deanna dressed in her nicest dress, the one she'd made from the fabric they bought in August. Samuel wore his best clothes and drove the wagon carefully over the familiar road. "Nervous?" he asked as they approached Las Lunas. "A little. Are you? About marrying you? Not even slightly." "About what people will say. I stopped caring about that a long time ago." They found the minister at the small church on the edge of town. Reverend Walsh was an elderly man with kind eyes who'd known Samuel since he was a boy. "Samuel Ortega, I heard about your accident. How are you healing?" "Well enough to get married if you'll perform the ceremony." Reverend Walsh looked at Deanna with interest. "This must be the young lady I've heard about. Miss Kensington, is it?" "Yes, sir, Deanna Kensington." "And you want to marry this stubborn cowboy more than anything." "Well then, let's make it official. Do you have witnesses?" They found Mrs. Chen and her husband, who were delighted to serve as witnesses. The ceremony was simple, held in the church with afternoon light streaming through the windows. Samuel held Deanna's hand and spoke his vows in a steady voice, promising to love and honor her for the rest of his life. Deanna repeated her own vows, meaning every word. When Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed her thoroughly, not caring that they had an audience. "Congratulations, Mrs. Ortega," he whispered against her lips. "I like the sound of that." They celebrated with a meal at Chen's restaurant, then bought a simple gold band from the jeweler that Samuel slipped onto Deanna's finger. It wasn't fancy, but it was real, and it meant everything. On the ride back to the ranch, Deanna couldn't stop looking at the ring on her finger. She was married. She had a husband who loved her, a home, a purpose. 6 months ago, she'd arrived in New Mexico with nothing. Now she had everything that mattered. Happy? Samuel asked, catching her staring at the ring again. "Incredibly. You, more than I ever thought possible." He shifted the reins to one hand so he could take hers. "I know the house isn't fancy and the work is hard and winters can be rough out here. But I promise I'll spend every day trying to make you happy." "Samuel, you already make me happy, just by being exactly who you are." When they arrived back at the ranch, the crew was waiting. Someone had strung up lanterns and there was music playing. The men cheered when Samuel helped Deanna down from the wagon, announcing she was now Mrs. Ortega. "About time," Tom called out. "We've been waiting for this since August." There was dancing and food and celebration late into the night. Deanna danced with Samuel, despite his still healing leg, then with each of the ranch hands who wanted to congratulate her. She felt embraced by these rough, kind men who'd become like family. Late that night, Samuel carried her over the threshold of his house, their house now, and set her down gently in the bedroom. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ortega," he said. "I've been home for months," Deanna replied, pulling him down for a kiss. "I just didn't know it yet." They made love slowly, carefully because of his healing ribs, and it was tender and perfect and everything Deanna had never let herself dream of. Afterward, lying in his arms, she felt completely at peace. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too. Always." The winter that followed was cold but happy. Deanna settled fully into her role as Samuel's wife, managing the household, cooking for the crew, helping with the ranch accounts. She learned to ride horseback despite her initial fear, so she could accompany Samuel around the property. He taught her about the land, the cattle, the rhythms of ranch life. They spent long evenings by the fire, reading together, making plans for the future. Samuel wanted to expand the herd, maybe buy the adjacent property if it came up for sale. Deanna dreamed of a garden in the spring, maybe some chickens of her own. Christmas came, and they celebrated with the crew, Diana cooking a feast that had everyone groaning with fullness. She'd made gifts for each of the men, small things like knitted scarves and baked goods. Samuel gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal. "For writing down recipes," he said, "or anything else you want to remember." She gave him new books she'd ordered from Santa Fe, ones she knew he'd been wanting. They sat together on Christmas night, content in each other's presence, watching the fire burn low. In January, Deanna realized she'd missed her monthly courses. She said nothing at first, not wanting to raise hopes until she was certain. But when February came and went with the same absence, she could no longer deny what was happening. She told Samuel on a cold evening in early March. He was at his desk, working on the ranch books when she came to stand beside him. "I have something to tell you," she said, her heart racing. He looked up immediately, hearing something in her voice. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I'm perfectly fine. Better than fine, actually." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Samuel stared at her, processing the words. Then his face broke into the most beautiful smile she'd ever seen. He stood, pulling her into his arms carefully. "A baby? Really? Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be. I think it will be born in late September or early October." "Deanna, I don't have words." He was actually crying, tears streaming down his face. "I'm going to be a father. You're going to be a wonderful father." He kissed her then, pouring all his joy and love and hope into it. When they finally broke apart, he was laughing. "We need to prepare. The baby will need a room and furniture and clothes. We need to make sure you're healthy, that you're not working too hard." "Samuel, I'm fine. Women have babies all the time. Not my wife, not carrying my child." His hands went to her stomach, protective and reverent. "I'm going to take care of you, both of you." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Deanna continued her work as long as she was able, though Samuel fussed over her constantly. The ranch hands treated her like precious glass, rushing to help with anything heavy, making sure she always had a chair nearby. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she told Tom when he wouldn't let her carry a basket of vegetables. "Boss's orders, madam. We're not taking any chances with you or that baby." Samuel prepared a nursery in their house, building a cradle with his own hands, painting the walls a cheerful yellow. Deanna sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full of anticipation and some fear. She knew childbirth was dangerous, had known women who died in the process. But she tried to focus on the positive, on the life growing inside her. In late September, as the leaves began to turn gold again, Diana woke in the middle of the night with the first pains. She touched Samuel's shoulder. "It's time," she said quietly. Samuel was up instantly, lighting lamps, sending one of the men for the midwife in town, boiling water, doing all the things they'd prepared for. Mrs. Chen arrived with the midwife, both women calm and efficient. The labor was long and hard. Deanna had never experienced pain like this, never knew her body could endure so much. But Samuel stayed with her through all of it, holding her hand, wiping her face, whispering encouragement. "You're so strong," he told her. "You can do this. I love you so much." As dawn broke on September 28, 1879, their baby was born. Deanna heard the cry and felt overwhelming relief wash through her exhaustion. "It's a boy," the midwife announced, cleaning the baby and wrapping him in a blanket. "A big, healthy boy." She placed the baby in Deanna's arms, and Deanna looked down at the tiny face, the shock of dark hair, the perfect little fingers. Tears streamed down her face as she held her son. "Samuel, look at him. He's perfect." Samuel was crying too, looking at his son with wonder. "He's beautiful." "You're both beautiful. Deanna, thank you. Thank you for him, for everything." They named him Daniel, after Deanna's mother, whose maiden name had been Daniels. Daniel Samuel Ortega, a tiny person who represented everything they'd built together. The next weeks were exhausting and magical in equal measure. Deanna learned to navigate new motherhood with Samuel's devoted help. He changed diapers, walked the baby when he cried at night, sang Spanish lullabies his own mother had taught him. The ranch hands took turns coming by to meet the new addition. These rough cowboys transformed into gentle admirers of the tiny baby. "He's got your eyes," Tom told Samuel, peering into the cradle. "He's got Deanna's stubbornness," Samuel replied with a grin. As autumn turned to winter and Daniel grew from newborn to infant, Deanna reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her here. Just over a year ago, she'd stepped off a stage in Las Lunas with nothing but the clothes on her back and $3 in her shoe. She'd been desperate, alone, terrified of what would become of her. Now she had a husband who loved her completely, a son who was the light of her life, a home that felt like sanctuary, and work that gave her purpose. She'd found family in the ranch hands, respect in the community despite early gossip, and a sense of belonging she'd never had even in the city of her birth. One evening in December, as snow fell softly outside and Daniel slept in his cradle, Deanna and Samuel sat together by the fire. He had his arm around her, and she leaned into his warmth. "You ever regret it?" Samuel asked quietly. "Marrying me, staying here, giving up the chance for an easier life somewhere else?" Diana turned to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, the old fear that he wasn't enough. "Samuel Ortega, the day I stepped off that stage and into your life was the luckiest day I ever lived. You didn't just give me a job. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You loved me when I had nothing to offer but my work and my heart. You made me feel valued and seen and cherished. How could I possibly regret that? I just want you to be happy." "I am happy, happier than I ever imagined possible," she kissed him softly. "I arrived here with only the clothes on my back, remember? And you said you had everything else. You were right. You had everything I needed, everything that truly matters. You still do. I love you," he said, pulling her closer. "I'll love you forever." Forever sounds perfect. The years that followed brought both challenges and joys. The ranch continued to prosper under Samuel's management. They expanded their holdings, bought new stock, weathered bad seasons, and celebrated good ones. Deanna became known throughout the territory for her cooking, her kindness, and her partnership with her husband in managing the Crossing S. Daniel grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved horses and following his father around the ranch. When he was 3, a daughter joined the family, little Maria, named for Samuel's mother. She had Diana's green eyes and her father's stubborn determination. 2 years later came another son, Thomas, named for the old cowboy who'd become like a grandfather to their children. The ranch hands came and went over the years, but there was always a core group who stayed, who became extended family. Tom eventually retired, but lived in a small house on the property, watching the children grow and offering advice nobody asked for, but everyone appreciated. Carlos and Miguel brought their own families to work on the ranch, their children growing up alongside the Ortega kids. Deanna never forgot where she'd come from or how far she'd traveled. She helped other women who found themselves in desperate circumstances, offering work or assistance, remembering what it felt like to arrive somewhere with nothing. She and Samuel became known for their generosity and fair treatment of everyone who worked for them. On their 10th anniversary, Samuel took Deanna back to the spot where they'd first kissed, under the brutal sun while he was fixing a wagon wheel. It was spring now, wildflowers blooming across the grassland, the air sweet and warm. "You remember this place?" he asked, taking her hand. "Of course. You told me I was remarkable. You are remarkable, even more so now." He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I never got you a proper engagement ring. I want to fix that." Inside the box was a beautiful ring with a small diamond and green stones that matched her eyes. Deanna gasped. "Samuel, it's gorgeous. 10 years ago, you married a broken-down cowboy and never asked for anything but his love. Let me give you this small thing now." She held out her hand, and he slipped the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band. It caught the sunlight, sparkling brilliantly. "Thank you," she whispered. "For this, for everything, for being exactly who you are. Thank you for seeing me when I didn't think anyone would. For taking a chance on a life you never planned. For loving me." They kissed there in the meadow, surrounded by wildflowers and the endless New Mexico sky, as much in love as they'd been 10 years ago, maybe more. As they walked back toward the ranch house hand in hand, Deanna saw their children playing in the yard, saw the home they'd built together, saw the life they'd created from nothing but love and determination and hope. She thought about the frightened young woman who'd arrived here with only the clothes on her back, who'd taken the biggest risk of her life accepting a job from a stranger. That woman would barely recognize herself now. Deanna had become strong, confident, grounded. She'd found her place in the world, found work that mattered, found love that sustained her through everything. She'd built something real and lasting, had raised children who knew they were valued, had created a home that welcomed everyone who came through its doors. Samuel squeezed her hand, and she looked up to find him smiling at her with that look that still made her heart skip after all these years. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am. How far we've come." "We've come far together, that's what matters." "Together," Deanna agreed. "Always together." They reached the house as the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Their children ran to greet them, and Samuel scooped up Maria while Thomas grabbed Deanna's hand, both of them talking at once about their day's adventures. Daniel, now 10 and trying to be grown up, rolled his eyes at his younger siblings but smiled at his parents. That evening, after the children were in bed and the house was quiet, Deanna and Samuel sat on their porch and watched the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. The same stars she'd watched alone that first night when she'd been new here and uncertain of everything. Now she knew this land, knew its rhythms and seasons, knew the man beside her better than she knew herself. "Tell me again," Samuel said softly, "about that first day when you arrived." "You know that story. I like hearing you tell it." Deanna smiled and settled more comfortably against his shoulder. "I stepped off the stage with nothing but the clothes on my back and $3 in my shoe. I was terrified. My aunt was dead, I had no plan, and I thought my life was essentially over. What changed? A stubborn cowboy with kind eyes offered me a job, trusted me with his household before he even knew me, treated me like I was worth something when I felt worthless." She turned to look at him. "You changed everything, Samuel. You gave me more than just employment. You gave me hope. You gave me something too, purpose beyond just running the ranch, someone to build a life with instead of just surviving, someone to love. And now look at us. 3 children, a thriving ranch, more years ahead of us." "More years to love you," Samuel said, kissing her forehead. "That's all I want. More years with you, watching our children grow, building our life together. Everything else is just details." Deanna thought about that word, together. It had defined their entire relationship from the beginning. They'd built everything together, faced every challenge side by side, celebrated every victory as partners. She'd arrived with nothing, and he'd said he had everything else. But the truth was, they'd created everything that mattered together, piece by piece, day by day. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their first kiss, the birth of their children, every moment of their shared life. Deanna held Samuel's hand and knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She'd come west looking for salvation, and found so much more. She'd found home, family, purpose, and a love that would sustain her through whatever years remained. The girl who'd fled Philadelphia in fear and desperation was gone, transformed into a woman who knew her own strength, who'd built something real and lasting from nothing but courage and hope. "I love you," she whispered into the quiet night. "I love you too," Samuel replied. "Today, tomorrow, and every day after that." "Forever," Deanna promised. "Forever," he agreed. The end.